Hello, thank you very much, everybody. Welcome to the Male Champions of Change 2015 Leadership Forum. I opened today by mentioning what a high-powered room it is. I think it's a mark of the huge respect and also affection many of you have for the woman who has driven this initiative, Elizabeth Broderick, Australia's Federal Sex Discrimination Commissioner. Bar an address to the National Press Club, this is Liz's last big event in the role as her term ends next week. She will be continuing to work with the Male Champions of Change, though. The reason that Liz has so many admirers is that she's approached this role in a warm, inclusive manner, always pragmatically and never ideologically or politically. This has allowed her to draw together so many different people and to get us all talking about, and more importantly, acting on issues that affect all Australian women, from the most marginalised right through to the highest corporate flyers. She has been a tireless campaigner for equality for all of us. Please join me in welcoming to the stage now, Elizabeth Broderick.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks, Dallas. Thank you for those warm words, Lee, and thank you so much for the work you do for gender equality. You can't be what you can't see, so to look up and see you there every evening, Lee, it's very inspiring, so thank you so very much. I too acknowledge that we're meeting on the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and pay my respects to elders past and present. Well, thank you is my duty before all else. And I want to start by thanking the Male Champions of Change. Your capability, your creativity, and most importantly, your courage in joining me in our quest to shape a more gender equal Australia are so inspiring. So I want to thank you. As Charles Darwin said in the late 1800s, he said, it's not the strongest or most intelligent who will survive, but those who can best manage change. And that's what you're all about. I also want to thank a few more people. I want to thank Cindy Hook. She's our first female successor to a Male Champion of Change, to Guillaume Swigers. And she's come in as our special advisor, and she's made an enormous difference. I want to thank the implementation leaders. I know that the men always say the ideas are theirs, but I know that sitting behind each of them is a wise implementation leader, so thank you. To the Commonwealth Bank, the CBA team, who have put on the event today, who've done all the organisation, thank you for arranging such a fabulous event. We've loved working with you. And a special... And a special thanks to McKinsey. McKinsey came with me right from the beginning, believing in what was a modest idea, one that held promise. And Angus Dawson, John Lydon, Natalie Davis and Jules Carrigan, together with Ellie Brown, who's been helping us over the last few months, you have always been there providing wise counsel, so I thank you so very much for that. I want a huge shout out to... A huge shout out to Janet Menzies. Many of you will know Janet, our program director. Stories like ours do not unfold without the support of a talented senior leader. And Janet was an early believer. She came to us after 9 years at McKinsey. It's impossible to overestimate the impact that Janet has had on the MCC strategy. So Janet, thank you. Thank you for your wisdom, your courage and your commitment. And finally, to my team at the Australian Human Rights Commission, to Lisa, Alison and Lynette, who've worked closely with me on the strategy, and to my fellow commissioners. Thank you for your support. I will miss the Commission enormously, and I look forward to continuing our work together, though, on this particular strategy. I step down next week as Australia's Sex Discrimination Commissioner, a role that has been my dream job, a role that I've absolutely loved. And when I think back, it has been such a remarkable privilege to serve Australia in that role for the last 8 years. What I've come to understand now is that we have before us some breathtaking opportunities disguised as insoluble problems. So today I want to take a moment to reflect on these and to give you a couple of insights that I have from the Male Champions of Change. Picture this. I'm in the United Nations in freezing New York earlier in March this year, together with the Minister for Women. 20 years ago, our world leaders came together in Beijing and they made binding commitments to progress gender equality across the world. Surrounded by women and men from every nation, I'm in the United Nations to assess what's been achieved. I feel moments of intense optimism when I think of some of the strategies, when I think of the Male Champions of Change, but I also feel profound frustration. Yes, we're told we have made good progress on women's access to education. There are now as many girls in primary school as there are boys. We have made progress on women's maternal health. But on women's access to economic power and leadership, very little progress at all. The hard truth is that the closer women get to economic power, the greater the forces of exclusion. As I sit in disbelief, my conviction for disruption grows. It is women's collective activism that has delivered the equality that we have today. And I have to say, I stand in awe of the accomplishments of countless women day after day who have demanded more. But I ask myself, if gender equality is my birthright, why would I accept anything less? Why would I accept the glacial pace of change? Gender equality is the unfinished business of the 21st century. It goes to the heart of who we are and how we live. It's not a battle of the sexes, it's a battle for equality, a battle that women and men must wage side by side. I now have a deep belief that if we are to accelerate reform, we must supplement women's collective activism with overtly disruptive approaches. Approaches that take the call to action directly to the heart of power. As one of our male champions says, he said, men invented the system, men largely run the system, men need to change the system. I couldn't agree more. And that's what the Male Champions of Change strategy is all about, men changing the system. And today you've seen 4 examples of that. But what do you see? What do you take away for yourself? Well, number one, you see these men stepping up. Their leadership is public, it's courageous and exposed. Leadership's about seeking to understand, having a spirit of inquiry, thinking it through and having the courage to implement. You might consider the hard-headed reasons why businesses like yours need a gender diversity strategy. You may also consider the soft-hearted reasons, for they too will have a place in your motivation. Take on board the experience of others or create your own. Leadership is a catalyst. It's where you start. Number 2, you see these men listening and learning. Take domestic violence as a workplace issue. Part of their learning involved not just listening to the experts, but also listening to the stories of courageous survivors of domestic violence, 2 of whom, Christy McKellar and Rosie Badia, who are with us today. The male champions heard about the pieces that are taken from you that can never be reclaimed, like the joy of seeing your son grow up. They heard about the trials of struggling to hold down a job whilst hiding the bruises, or arriving late at work because your husband has hidden the car keys, or getting a call at work from your partner to say he's leaving your 6-month-old at home alone. And number 3, you see these men taking action today on 4 priority areas. Action is, as you know, not just the implementing of an idea. Your action needs to be directed at your vision of something better, the what-ifs that we've seen in the videos earlier. A step along the road of change that looks like, smells like, and feels like a turning point. And like all good change initiatives, a turning point that everyone can see, that calls people to action and encourages feedback. Not decide, do, move on, but rather listen, learn, lead. So what have I learnt? Well, I've learnt that gender equality leaders are gender equality achievers, that they recognise that the status quo is no longer the place to be. They have a visible commitment to change. They set targets that crystallise intent. They ensure that gender diversity is part of a business strategy. They invest time and energy in capital, energy and capital through planned intervention. They work out the interventions that work and those that don't. They course correct, and then they start that whole cycle all over again. Basically, they make a decision to lead. They never lose sight of a goal, like Andy, like Elma, like Andrew and David. I've also learnt that you don't have to be extraordinary to have influence. One woman, Sarah, recently in the United Nations told me, she said she did what she could when she could. That's how she changed the world. And I think that simple concept gives us confidence and energy. Do what you can when you can. We can all have influence one way or another. And thirdly, I've learnt that if we don't actively and intentionally include women, the system will unintentionally exclude them. This idea that we'll just pour in a few women and stir will never work. The reason for this is that most institutions are deeply rooted in a male way of being, a male life trajectory. I make no judgment about that. That's simply the history of organisations. But what I would say is that's why embracing targets is just so important, particularly targets with teeth. It doesn't so much matter what the target is, it's the act of setting the target and making it public that matters. And just for the record, targets and merit are not mutually exclusive. Targets are necessary to allow women's merit to be revealed. That's also why the panel pledge matters, because the panel pledge is about actively and intentionally including women. There can be no legitimate conversation without the voices of women. Now, I want you to imagine two prospects. I'm an optimist in my heart with a realist living in my head. And I think of you as a committed leader of your organisation who wants to do what's best. You'll remember at the outset, we asked 4 what-if questions. We asked, what if all roles were flexible? What if every leader took the panel pledge? What if gender targets had teeth? And what if domestic violence was accepted as a workplace issue? Well, I have 2 further what-ifs, 2 prospects, and I put them to you as more than change imagined. I put them to you as change in progress, a change that results from today's event, a result of Australian leaders and organisations co-creating the change we must deliver. Prospect 1, what if we all step up? If I was to take my calculator and the ABS labour force statistics, I could estimate that with the 750 or 800 of you attending here today, you represent 1.1 million employees, more than 500,000 women. That means you represent more than 10% of women employed in our nation. Now that's a sizable chunk. On any matter that requires an investment of time and energy, you'll be affected by some doubt and you'll be touched by some belief. Doubt because that's a trait that bestows humility, that acknowledges your responsibility, that keeps you searching for the best solution. And strong belief because belief keeps you focused on the outcome and allows you to get others on board. But my optimist heart and my realist head are telling me something encouraging. They're telling me that you are perhaps ready to bring doubt and belief into some kind of productive balance. because in that productive balance of doubt and belief is my best reason for being optimistic. I am optimistic that many of you will move the dial in your corner of Australia. We have the power in this room, all of us acting together to move the dial. Prospect 2, what if we all step up now? We create a watershed, an unstoppable momentum. You have the power to decide that the opportunity's now, but productive impatience is what we must have. Progress lies in accessing the willing collaboration of decent people, one organisation at a time. We have to look to ourselves, not just the solutions. We cannot wish our goal into existence in the slipstream of ideas and actions passing us by. We must call all to action, not just to repeat the patterns of others, but to live the possibility of change. We cannot wait for these issues to resolve themselves. We must maintain the momentum. So what if we, all of us, were to climb the hill of ambition, focus our energies, gather our best selves, and shape a more gender-equal future? To reach inside ourselves to both our heads and our hearts and give gender equality a chance. Thank you.
Flower boy.
Thanks,
Obviously.
David. Thanks for that.
Is this on now? Okay, Liz, it's so hard to say thank you and goodbye because you've been such a wonderful Sex Discrimination Commissioner. Now what, 8 years?
Yeah,
Look, on behalf of the Male Champions of Change, I just want to say a few words because managing the Male Champions of Change is a challenge. We very rarely have our own views, and Liz has to somehow navigate through us. But Liz, all the words you said today were just inspiring. This moving from doubt to belief, because I can remember personally, there's times when I feel frustrated that we're not making progress. And I remember saying to you at one point, look, Liz, as much as we've done all these things, the numbers aren't changing. And you know, Liz's words were to me, keep going, David. Little by little will make a difference, because that is what it is really like. And as I said on the video, this whole sense of authenticity, because it's so easy to get caught up in the ideal and not to have the real conversations. And as you said, you know, belief and yet action is so important. And Liz has epitomised that in everything we've done. And she's kept us going, she's kept us on the straight and narrow. And while I know you're going to continue with the Male Champions of Change, which is I'm glad to hear, that you do move on from the Commissioner role. And we wish you all the best in your career. We thank you for these wonderful words today, and we look forward to working with you a lot more in the future.
Thank you.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, Liz Broderick.
Thanks so much, David. Thank you. It's beautiful.